This presentation was recorded at the 2015 ANZICS ACCCN Annual Scientific Meeting.
I'd like to welcome our third speaker, Dr. Liz Crowe. Dr. Crowe, sorry. I'd like to invite our third speaker, Liz Crowe, who's not yet a doctor. She's working on it. She's an advanced clinician social worker from Paediatric Intensive Care of the Lady Chilento Hospital in Brisbane. She is currently undertaking a PhD, so we're just being premature because I'm sure she'll get this on staff wellbeing and critical care. So I'd invite her to address on the perspective of family advocate.
Thank you. I'm only doing a PhD, so someone will call me a doctor. Well. I'm representing the family today, and I must say it's flabbergasting to me that all of these crazy, psychotic families walk around in the society, not going unknown to the police. Their kids normally attend schools, and they have friends, and funnily enough, they come into our intensive care environment, and they're manipulative, stupid, splitters. They're the ones I hate the most. The splitters. Suddenly, they're crazy town. They need managing because we know best for a whole range of reasons. Within a few minutes, most of us have assessed them and lined them up. And I think as a psychological test of what that might be like, I really like Martha's coding system. And so what I've been doing is watching you all while this talk's been going on, and I've coded you for tonight's drinking party. And I've decided who's a yellow, red and a green threat for drinking. Because I've known you and watched you longer than most of our PICU families before they get to be assessed. And I think it's so interesting that we can have all of these lovely conversations about families and we don't talk about love at all. Never mentioned. We don't talk about, really deep grief, sorrow and distress. We just talk about, we have some rules, we need you to obey them. And it's no coincidence that the families we like the most are the families who are most compliant, they smell the nicest, the grandmother brings in the baking. Surprise, surprise, they're the families who are most like us. And those other stinky, horrible families who don't do what they're told, we code red them. And then we are going to supervise them within an inch of their life. And do you know what is most propelling to me about this? Is the families that are most difficult on the whole are doctors' children, nurses' children, and teachers' children. And in ward rounds, and don't say you've never said this, because I've sat through a hell of a lot of ward rounds in my life, where people will say, oh, and just to let you know, the father's a radiologist, so he thinks he knows everything. It must be awfully hard to get things right as a parent in our intensive care units. So let's just bear that in mind as we go through what life is like. So why are these parents so bloody difficult? You don't know this family. And what I hear parents say often is, you don't know me. You don't know my child. You have never heard them laugh, or cry, or be naughty, or giggle, or play. You don't know the warmth of their body. You don't know our history. You don't know how hard I tried to conceive or how ambivalent I was when I was pregnant. You don't know what this child means to me. You don't know how they smell. You don't know what they like to eat. You don't know what helps them go to sleep at night. These parents didn't know, on the whole, on the day that they come to us, that was the last moment, minute, second of normality of their lives. They didn't know it was the last time they would hear their child's voice. They didn't know it was the last cuddle. They didn't know that it was the last breath. And usually, they don't get to determine then what that last conversation was. And hopefully it's loving, but if they're a normal parent, it may not have been. It might have been, shut up and eat your dinner. Or get on your bike and go to school. I don't want to hear you're annoying. And when you get home, you're going to get in big trouble. That can be the last words. You don't know why these parents need these children. You don't know what it means to their lives. We don't know, and these parents don't know in the moment, whether they have the ability to stay alive when their own child has died. So we don't actually know a lot of things about these parents, and yet we assess them. And I'm guilty of this. I write a nice little assessment in the chart. Tell the ward round all the things that you can't write in the chart or you'll end up at the Health Commission. But we assess them based on seeing them in the worst moments of their lives, when they don't have resources. How many of you have ever lost control? Like yelled, said stupid things in the heat of the moment? I have. No one else in the audience. You know, in those moments, imagine if someone came and assessed you. Assessed you. You'd be a splitter, manipulative, out of control. Do you have poor impulse control? I do, usually between the hours of 6:30 a.m. and 7:10 when I've got to get on the train. It starts off loving, doesn't it? Please get out of bed. Made your lunches. Love you. Get out of bed. Get out of bed, you selfish children. And it all escalates and then you go, love you. Get on the train and think, that's not who I wanted to be as a parent. All of us have the potential to be difficult parents in an intensive care. And nothing drives a health professional more nuts than when you're not being taken seriously. And a lot of these parents don't come to us with huge resources. They don't come to us from a loving environment, with a supportive partner and money in the bank, someone who's going to drop over a lasagna. That's not who they are before they got to us. And so sometimes what we need to do is just take a little step back and try and work out who these people are and what they're trying to communicate. And they might be doing it really poorly. They might be calling you an effing something. They might kick the trolley on the way in. But what are they really trying to say? Often, I'm scared. That's it. So, I think the paradigm is shifting. Once upon a time when I started as a social worker, lots of the time doctors just made decisions, this kid's not viable, or this kid's not even going to ICU, and the kids just died. And those days are over. People can pick up their phone and find out who you are, what your qualifications are, and they can look up Google to find out what are the options. And they're going to hold us to task. And that is both a really powerful thing and a really threatening thing for us. And that's going to make our jobs really difficult. End-of-life care in particular, in the PICU contents, is changing all of the time. What we can do, what we should do, and how we do it. And I think the thing is that whatever we do, particularly around death, whatever we say, whatever conversations, that will be those parents the start of their bereavement path, or the start of their long journey of having a child with disability, or of having a child who needs rehabilitation. And they will remember our words long after we have forgotten them. So sometimes it's really good to catch yourself, catch your own breath before we go into battle with these families. Often we invite families to bring photos and put it beside the bed so that we know who this child is. And they're confronting. These kids often are unrecognisable from the child in the bed. And it's part of our coping mechanism. You'll say, can I have a family meeting with such and such? And someone will say, who's that? And we all say, oh, you know, the head injury, kid with CF, the neuroblastoma. They're not even named, not even an age. They're all of a sudden their diagnosis. What must that be like for families when they're trying so desperately to say, you have to bring your best game today because this is my kid now. It's not some kid. It's not the kid that got run down by the truck. It's my kid. And how can we possibly ask these parents who are sleep deprived, crazy with grief, beside themselves, who are trying to learn a language that they don't understand, doing procedures, seeing their child swollen, how can we ask them to give consent? How do we realistically bring them into a family meeting and ask them to participate? It's hardly fair. We were talking about this last night, and, I don't know jack squat about my car. I can't even change a tyre. I know it's so girly, it's pathetic, but I can't. That's why I'm in ACCCN. If my tyre goes flat, I just ring someone. They change it. If the mechanic said to me, let's talk about what you want done to the Camry today, I'd be like, make it go. And for lots of families, that's what they're saying. Fix it. And people's perception of medicine is so vastly different from our reality. People honestly don't know that people still die. They don't know it. I just spent 3.5 years doing a massive advanced care planning project with people over the age of 65. And it was mind-blowing to me how many of them are like, but do you think, we'll really deteriorate and die? So, yeah, I do. You're going to die. And I did a very dangerous thing recently where I was getting my eyebrows waxed. And I had wax. She was like putting the wax on. And the beauty therapist said to me, you know a fair bit about old people? And I said, not really. I work in paediatrics. She said, well, my mother's 93 and she still lives independently and she fell over last week in the garden. And she's just not been herself. So I took her to the GP who put her on antidepressants. And she doesn't seem to be so good. So what do you think we should do? And I said, well, I think you guys should probably start getting organised for the fact that your mother's probably going to die soon. And can she live independently? And she nearly took my whole eyebrow off. She's like, what do you mean Mum's going to die? And I said, well, she's 93. And she said, yeah, but why would she die? I'm like, because she's 93. Like, you do know you don't live forever. And she's like, yeah, but she's so well. I'm like, yeah, but she's still 93. And this is where people are at. So when they turn on the TV and everything they see is like hairy boy or man gets his whole face transplanted, it is inconceivable to them that in the year 2015 we can't fix our children. We can't fix them. It's inconceivable. Surely there's something. And then they get on the internet and it's like, if they've just put the first pig's trachea in a child. And they're like, well, can you give that a go? Sincerely, we had a dad. Sorry, not laughing. We had a dad last year whose child had a very severe head injury, and he came to me and he said, I've thought a lot about it. And Liz, I want you to tell the doctors I'm going to give my son my brain as a transplant, and then I'll just be a truck driver or something. And like, poker face, think of like starving children in Africa. I'm like, that's a very generous offer. But unfortunately, we're just not quite there medically because you actually can't live without a brain. He's like, really? Really? So if this is where we're operating from, we have to give families some time to get their head around that we can't fix everyone. Because this is what they know of their child. Alive. So full of life. How could your child possibly die before you? Because people who've never had that experience, and we now have whole families who've never had someone die. Never seen a dead person. Like, this is the first time in history that this has happened. Our society doesn't get death. Doesn't get that there's some things that you can't learn on the internet. It's like, yeah, look, I know you did medicine and all that, but I read on Google last night, and I've been watching the stats, and they're at 96. It's like, it's stats. All right. There's no one prescriptive way to grieve. So often when we have this whole fighting thing going on, It's grief. What they are trying to say to you is, don't say it. Don't say that this is a bad diagnosis. Don't say that they're going to be damaged. Don't say they're going to be different. Don't say they're going to die. That's why they're fighting with us. It's grief. And you know, what's complicated grief? I love that term, complicated grief. Thomas Attic said, grief is nearly always complicated because when it comes to grief, you have to relearn everything you knew about the world. Everything, from scratch. Everything that you thought was going to happen. And we're asking people to do that in a 36-hour period. Are you there yet? Are they there yet? I love that when they go, Liz, is the family there yet? It's like, it's been 4.5 hours. No, they're not. Okay. When we look at parental decision making, the things that they're most concerned about is they don't want their child to suffer. But what we call suffering and what they call suffering are different things. If their child is ventilated and has a tube down their throat, it doesn't scare them to say they're suffering, they've got a tube down their throat, because you just told them they don't feel anything. We give these mixed messages all the time. It's very hard for us to project quality of life. If we have given a family 13 years prior an extremely disabled child and said, good luck, you're on your own, when they come back in with pneumonia and we say, well, your child doesn't really have a quality of life, that is like destroying them, saying everything you have done for every minute for the last 13 years was worth nothing. What parent's going to go, oh, okay, good, thanks. We feel good to go with that. We'll see you at the funeral. Nobody. They can't do that. And do you know, there's not a parent alive with a neonate in particular that can possibly conceive that living with a child that's very disabled is less doable than living with a child that's dead. It's not a parent alive. Most people think this is the burden. After everything I've seen in my entire career, if someone rang me now and said one of my kids had had a head injury, I would be that parent. I'm not saying I'd stay there the whole time, but it would take me time to get my head around it. Because at this given second, there is nothing more inconceivable for me than living without one of them. Nothing. And that's with all the things I know. So if you're Joe Blow off the street, it's going to take some time. Futility is a word that only we know. The other day, one of our consultants, who's a lovely communicator, said to the mum, I think we're at a point of futility. I'm sorry. And she burst into tears. She sobbed into her lap. And he looked at me like, she's got it. And I went, what does futility mean? And she said, I don't know, but I can tell by your faces it's bad. It's a medical concept. It's not something we use in the community all the time. And you know, the number one thing they want to be is a good parent. We are asking them to make decisions that are going to change the course of their lives. You've got 2.5 minutes. We're going to be back later this afternoon for the course of your life. Good luck with that. They can't do it. And they're stressed, and they've had nothing to eat, and they haven't been to sleep. And a lot of them are guilty. They're guilty because they took their eye off them for a second, they fell in the pool. They're guilty because they had a headache and they sent them to school anyway. They're guilty because they're a working parent. They're guilty because there's something. They're guilty because, particularly if you're a mother, there's something in your placenta, and even though they cut it off, it stays inside you, and for the rest of your life, anything that goes wrong is your fault. Everyone knows that. On the whole, you know, people are distrusting of us. That's what you're taught from the time you're born. Stranger danger. Don't trust a stranger. Oh, you know the thing that's most important to you in the world? Just trust this lot. And all of a sudden, you can't even visit. You can't even come near the bed unless you ask us. We will tell you when you can touch your child and how much you can talk to them. And, you know, we might accidentally bath them and we forgot to let you know. They get angry. It's pretty normal. The other thing is we know from a neuroscience point of view that people often mistake emotions for fact. So when you're in crisis, anything that you feel, you think, yeah, this is intuition. I've got this. I understand it. It's denial, because to sit there and have it totally told to you that your life is over, if you could absorb that in one hit, we would have parents jumping out of buildings left, right and centre. They have to believe that there's a possibility or hope that things are going to change, or else how do they go on? And we don't talk about love at all. Jonathan Gillis and Gillis Rennick in 2006 did a massive review of all the literature on PICU and paediatrics, and the word love wasn't mentioned once. Why do people do this? It's because of love, but we can't even say the word. It's like, don't mention it. It's like the war can't be raised. So then I try and teach our doctors to say, like, you obviously love your child and you're trying to make, and it's so funny because sometimes they get to the end of the conversation and they're like, oh, I haven't said the word love, and they go, oh, and we know you love your child. And I'm like, so close and yet still far away. All right. The way people demonstrate their love is based on their capacity and resources. I'm going to say some things that don't sound very social working now. I'm just trying to give you an example. But if you live in a caravan park, if you have a restraining order against 5 different individuals, if you're completely welfare dependent, if you have no one who's ever loved or nurtured you, when you get into the PICU, you're going to tell everyone to go F themselves. That is their grief. That's how they communicate. That's what they've got to understand. That's their language. I love when I get called and you meet a family, you get a fair idea of what's going on, and then you come in and they say, you better go and speak to that family because that mum and dad say the F word to each other all the time. And I'm like, I go, how's it going? They're like, it's effing hard. And I'm like, yeah, look, people think that because you're swearing all the time that you're going to get divorced, and they're like, really? That's so funny. It's like, I know, it's just how you speak. So, they don't come in and acquire this new language so that we can all feel good about ourselves. They're going to still be whoever they were before. You take who you are into every crisis. All right. Hope is really normal. It's a normal dynamic. And to have hope right to the very end is a very healthy thing. And parents are constantly trying to balance that. And we have to enable them to do that. Why do we want to be smug about having no hope? Why is that smug? Like, your kid still died. Told you no Jesus was coming. No, that's not to be our attitude. So what we have to help people say is like, we really hope for a miracle too. We hope we're wrong. We don't want your child to be injured or damaged or changed or dead. But what can we do if your God is here in a different way? What if God's got different plans for you today? Or Allah or whoever it is. What if you don't get the miracle? What else could we do just in case so we don't have any regrets? And then it's about remaining present to them, whatever happens. There's a huge thing about the power of time. In critical care, we often decide when enough is enough, but sometimes... Oh, have I just been rambling on here forever? Oh, power of time, got it. Very witty. So I think with the power of time, sometimes if you slow things down, you speed them up. So sometimes if we're like, this kid's been ventilated for 4 days, everyone knows they're brain dead, where are we going, what are we doing, we've got no purpose. Sometimes if you just say, everyone back off, and we give parents the opportunity to watch a child fail coming off a ventilator. We give them the opportunity to see that nothing's changing, that they're not waking up, that they still don't have any, reaction in the pupils, then people can get there on their own. But the more you push, the more someone wants to fight back. So sometimes we just have to say, let's take some time and parents get there on their own. People are afraid. They're concerned that their child's going to suffer. They already are suffering. And that's what anticipatory grief is really all about. So what do parents actually value? They want to have their child be treated with no regrets. They want to feel like they've had a real opportunity to convey love, to be present, to have made decisions. They want some privacy, which is very hard to have happen in a PICU environment. They want a perception that they've made really good decisions and they understood what was happening at all times. They want to know that they did the right thing and to be a good advocate for their child. They want to be a good life example for the rest of the family, and they don't want to allow any suffering. And I think all of us have the opportunity to do that at some time. Thank Thank you.